The brutal persecution of the Jews was one of the darkest chapters of the Second World War. Ghettos, concentration camps, and systematic genocide left an indelible mark on history. But one crucial question remains. Why did Hitler hate the Jews so much? How did that hatred spread so quickly across Europe with such devastating consequences? Today, we explore the true origins of this anti-Semitism and how it led to one of the greatest crimes against humanity. Stay until the end, because Hitler's plan to exterminate the Jews had a consequence he could never have imagined, one that changed history and continues to shape the world today. Before we begin, our goal is to reach 1 million subscribers. It may sound ambitious, but with your help, we can get there. Subscribe now, leave a like, and become part of this story. Hitler's roots. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20, 1889, in the small Austrian town of Braunau am Inn, near the German border. From an early age, his life was shaped by an unstable and conflict-ridden home. His father, Alois Hitler, was a strict, authoritarian civil servant who subjected his children to harsh discipline and showed them little affection. By contrast, his mother, Clara Hitler, was loving and protective. She tried to soften her husband's severity and create a more welcoming home for Hitler and his siblings. Hitler's relationship with his father was difficult and marked by frequent disagreements. Alois wanted his son to pursue a career in the civil service, while Hitler dreamed of becoming an artist. Alois's death in 1903 came as a relief to the young Hitler, giving him greater freedom to pursue his own interests. Despite the turmoil at home, there is no evidence that Hitler harbored anti-Semitic feelings during his childhood. He was an average student with a keen interest in history and art. His academic performance began to decline during adolescence, however, especially after the family moved to Linz. Around this time, he developed a fascination with figures from German history and began to embrace a romantic nationalist vision, idealizing a grand future for the Germanic people. At the beginning of the 20th century, Hitler moved to Vienna, the capital of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, hoping to enter the Academy of Fine Arts. The Academy rejected him twice, in 1907 and 1908, telling him that he lacked the talent to become a professional painter. The collapse of his artistic ambitions left a deep mark on his life. With no clear prospects, Hitler lived in poverty, taking odd jobs and selling watercolors to survive. During this period, he stayed in homeless shelters and spent time in cafes and libraries, where he began absorbing nationalist rhetoric and extremist ideologies. Vienna was a vibrant, cosmopolitan city with considerable ethnic and cultural diversity. Its large Jewish community, combined with the intensifying social and political tensions of the time, fueled growing anti-Semitism in Viennese society. Immersed in this environment, Hitler came under the influence of figures who used hatred of Jews as a political tool. One prominent example was Karl Lueger, the mayor of Vienna, who employed anti-Semitic rhetoric to rally popular support. Various writers and theorists also promoted racist and ultra-nationalist ideas that began to shape Hitler's worldview. He increasingly associated Jews with economic and social problems, constructing a narrative in which they were responsible for society's decline and the supposed corruption of Germanic values. These influences deepened when Hitler served as a soldier in the First World War. He volunteered for the German army in 1914, serving as a dispatch runner on the Western Front and receiving several decorations for bravery. But the conflict devastated Germany. After years of intense fighting, the country was defeated in 1918. For Hitler and many other soldiers, the defeat was traumatic. The stab-in-the-back theory began to gain ground, claiming that Germany had not been defeated militarily, but betrayed by Jews, communists, and other enemies within. This myth resonated with Hitler, reinforcing his hatred of Jews and deepening his conviction that Germany needed national renewal. The signing of the Treaty of Versailles in 1919 further intensified Hitler's resentment. The agreement imposed harsh penalties on Germany, including territorial losses, severe military restrictions, and exorbitant financial reparations. Hitler saw these punishments as an intolerable humiliation and a betrayal of the German people. He increasingly blamed Jews and socialists for Germany's collapse, further fueling his desire for revenge and his search for a political movement that could restore the nation's greatness. Upon returning to civilian life, Hitler became involved with nationalist groups and, in 1919, joined the German Workers' Party, which would later become the Nazi Party. His oratorical skill and ability to mobilize the masses quickly distinguished him within the party, enabling him to assume leadership of the movement. In the years that followed, he began articulating his ideology more explicitly, combining ultra-nationalist discourse with intensely anti-Semitic rhetoric. The belief in the superiority of the Aryan race became one of the fundamental pillars of Nazism. Hitler argued that the Germanic people should remain racially pure and free from influences he regarded as corrupting. Jews were portrayed as internal enemies, supposedly responsible for economic crises, cultural degeneration, and political instability. This hatred was not merely Hitler's personal obsession. It was incorporated into the ideological structure of Nazism as a whole. Nazi propaganda played a central role in spreading this view, using newspapers, radio broadcasts, and public speeches to portray Jews as an existential threat to Germany. In 1925, Hitler consolidated his ideas in his book Mein Kampf, setting out his worldview and his plans for Germany. The book stressed the need for authoritarian rule, territorial expansion to secure what he called Lebensraum, or living space, and the eradication of Jewish influence from society. The economic crisis that devastated Germany in the 1920s, compounded by the Great Depression of 1929, allowed his message to resonate with people desperate for solutions. Hitler gradually attracted a growing number of followers, paving the way for his rise to power and the implementation of his extremist ideology. Hitler's path, marked by personal failures, deep resentment, and radical ideological influences, helped shape one of the darkest periods in human history. His rhetoric found fertile ground in a weakened society and culminated in the rise of the Third Reich, a regime that would lead the world into a devastating war and an unprecedented genocide, as we will see throughout this video. What do you think of the content? Do you enjoy this kind of video? If so, leave a comment saying, "I want more stories." That encourages us to cover more historical topics and helps boost the video's engagement. And don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications so you know as soon as we post something new, and like the video so YouTube keeps recommending our content. Done all that? Then let's return to today's topic, the beginning of the Holocaust. In 1933, Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. The following year, he merged that office with the presidency and assumed the title of Führer. In effect, this marked the beginning of a dark period for the Jewish people. As one might expect, Hitler was a true dictator, and he soon began persecuting his political opponents and the ethnic groups he considered inferior. From the earliest years of the Nazi regime, Adolf Hitler's government established an extensive system of concentration camps. In its initial phase, these camps served mainly as detention sites for political opponents, dissidents, and groups the state deemed undesirable. However, as the Second World War progressed and Nazi policies became increasingly radical, the camps took on a central role in the systematic persecution of Jews, Roma, communists, Polish intellectuals, Soviet prisoners of war, and other minorities. Although the mortality rate in these places was extremely high, reaching around 50%, concentration camps were not initially conceived as centers for mass extermination. That changed drastically from 1941 onward, when the final solution was implemented. Beginning in 1942, the Nazis built 6 major extermination camps in occupied Poland, specifically designed for mass murder. These camps, Auschwitz-Birkenau, Treblinka, Sobibor, Belzec, Chelmno, and Majdanek, used gas chambers, mass shootings, and other brutal methods of execution to exterminate millions of people, most of them Jews. Unlike traditional concentration camps, where prisoners were subjected to forced labor and inhumane conditions that led to a slow death, the extermination camps operated with the efficiency of a production line, seeking to eliminate large groups of victims immediately. After the invasion of Poland in 1939 and the subsequent occupation of much of Eastern Europe, the Nazi camp network expanded rapidly. It is estimated that the Germans established around 15,000 camps and subcamps in the occupied territories, most of them in Eastern Europe, where the Jewish population was substantial. New camps were strategically built in areas with large Jewish populations, as well as Polish intellectual, communist, and Roma communities. Even within Germany's own borders, camps were established to accommodate the growing number of prisoners who were captured, deported, and forced to endure brutal conditions. The prisoners were transported in inhumane conditions. The deportees were crammed into freight cars without ventilation, food, or water, and many died of exhaustion, starvation, or suffocation before they even reached their destination. Those who survived the journey were often subjected to selection processes immediately upon arrival at the camps. The weakest, the sick, the elderly, and children were sent directly to the gas chambers or shot. Those considered fit for work were condemned to a routine of forced labor, extreme hunger, and constant violence. The policy of death through labor, Vernichtung durch Arbeit, was a deliberate method of Nazi extermination. Prisoners were forced to work exhausting shifts of 12 to 14 hours, often in war industries, including the manufacture of the V-2 rockets used by Nazi Germany. They worked in mines, armaments factories, and infrastructure projects, often without adequate equipment or any form of protection. When they reached a state of extreme debilitation, they were simply disposed of, either sent to the gas chambers, forced into the Gaswagen, gas trucks, or executed by firing squad. To control and catalog prisoners, some concentration camps, including Auschwitz, adopted numerical tattoos as a means of identification. Upon arrival, prisoners underwent registration procedures that included having their hair shaved and their clothes replaced with striped uniforms. Those deemed fit for work were assigned long shifts, often carried out in extreme temperatures under the constant surveillance of SS guards. Before and after work, they were subjected to seemingly endless roll calls and searches that could last for hours. During these inspections, it was not uncommon for prisoners who had fainted from hunger or cold to be left to die where they lay. Nazi camps became symbols of the terror and brutality of the Holocaust, where millions of lives were destroyed. Even as the Allies advanced during the final phase of the war, the Nazis tried to conceal their atrocities by dismantling gas chambers and burning documents. Yet the horrors witnessed by survivors and documented by the liberating forces revealed the unimaginable scale of these crimes to the world. The Nazi system of concentration and extermination camps remains one of the darkest chapters in human history, a reminder of the extreme consequences of hatred, racism, and intolerance. The consequences of the Holocaust. The Holocaust had a profound impact, leaving indelible scars on societies across Europe and throughout the world. Its effects extended far beyond the immense loss of life, shaping philosophical and theological debates, artistic expression, and political decisions around the globe. The fate of the survivors became one of the great challenges of the post-war era. The forced displacement of the Jewish population and the need for a safe haven for those who had lost everything directly contributed to the creation of the State of Israel. The Nazi genocide left millions of refugees, many of whom no longer had homes to return to. Entire communities had been devastated, and the few survivors often faced hostility and persistent antisemitism in their countries of origin. At first, the Allies intended to repatriate these displaced people. But with cities in ruins and many survivors unwilling to return, that solution proved unworkable. As a result, some 250,000 Jews remained confined to refugee camps for years, awaiting an uncertain fate. Immigration to Western countries, such as the United States and Canada, remained highly restricted, leading many survivors to see Palestine as the most viable destination. However, the region was under the control of the British Mandate, which imposed severe restrictions on Jewish immigration because of opposition from the local Arab population. In response to these difficulties, clandestine migration networks were organized by Jewish former combatants in Europe and by the Haganah in Palestine. This effort became known as Brika, and, despite British restrictions, succeeded in transporting approximately 250,000 Jews to Palestinian territory. With the end of the British Mandate and the subsequent creation of the State of Israel in 1948, many of these refugees found a home in the new nation. In addition, around 80,000 survivors were welcomed into the United States, 136,000 settled in Israel, and another 20,000 migrated to countries such as Canada and South Africa. In 1952, the last Jewish refugee camps were officially closed, bringing a painful chapter of post-war history to an end. The devastation of the Holocaust extended far beyond the loss of life. It also struck at the heart of Jewish culture. Before the Second World War, Yiddish was spoken by a community of roughly 11 to 13 million people. In the years leading up to the war, the language had gained recognition as a symbol of Jewish identity in Europe, with literature, theater, and the press flourishing, especially in Poland. But Nazi persecution and the extermination of around 5 million Yiddish speakers, approximately 85% of all Holocaust victims, virtually eradicated this culture from the continent. The systematic murder of entire communities brought about the collapse of Yiddish as an international language and jeopardized its future as a unifying force across the Jewish diaspora. The magnitude of the Holocaust also prompted profound reflection in the field of theology. The event led many scholars and religious thinkers to question divine goodness and justice, reshaping long-standing ideas about God's role in the world. So-called Holocaust theology emerged as an attempt to understand the extreme suffering endured by the Jewish people. Within Orthodox Jewish thought, some schools interpreted the tragedy as divine punishment, while others rejected that view entirely, arguing that no theological explanation could justify such brutality. For many, the Holocaust represented an unprecedented challenge to faith, triggering a spiritual crisis that continues to resonate today. In art and literature, the impact of the Holocaust was equally profound. The philosopher Theodor Adorno expressed this anguish by declaring that writing poetry after Auschwitz is barbaric. Yet the need to bear witness to the horrors people had experienced gave rise to a vast body of literary and artistic work, created both by survivors and by later writers and filmmakers. Among the most powerful works are Elie Wiesel's account, Night, Primo Levi's If This Is a Man, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and Anne Frank's diary, one of the most symbolic documents of Jewish suffering during the Nazi period. Poetry also became a vehicle for expression, as in Paul Celan's poem Todesfuge, which responded directly to Adorno's reflections on art after the Holocaust. In cinema, the Holocaust inspired numerous productions that helped educate the public and keep the memory of the tragedy alive. Films such as Schindler's List, The Pianist, and Life is Beautiful received worldwide recognition, bringing moving stories of resistance, suffering, and survival amid genocide. As the years pass and the generation of survivors grows older, efforts to preserve the memory of the Holocaust have become increasingly important. Projects such as the Survivors of the Shoah Visual History Foundation, founded by Steven Spielberg, and documentaries such as 4 Seasons seek to record the testimonies of those who lived through this dark period in history. Institutions dedicated to the study and remembrance of the Holocaust have also been established around the world, including Yad Vashem in Israel and the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. The United Nations designated January 27th as International Holocaust Remembrance Day to ensure that future generations never forget the atrocities that were committed. The Holocaust not only destroyed millions of lives, but also changed the course of history, leaving a legacy of pain and reflection and a constant need to fight hatred and intolerance. What did you think of today's video? Let us know in the comments. The Second World War is filled with extraordinary stories, but few are as remarkable as Audie Murphy's. He was one of the great heroes of the fight against the Nazis, and later became one of Hollywood's biggest names in the 1950s and 1960s. How did he achieve it all? To discover Audie Murphy's incredible life story, click the video now appearing in your recommendations.